With S3 access point, you can control access to a single bucket. You can control access to a single bucket for multiple users or multiple applications. For instance, let's say you have multiple or 2 or 3 applications sharing the same bucket, but each one of these applications, they only have access or they need access to a specific bucket. So you can use S3 access point to limit what they have access to. So for instance, application A, let's say we have 2 applications, application A and application B. If both of them want to access an S3 bucket, let's say a data analytical data set bucket, if these 2 applications wants to access the bucket, but inside the bucket there are 2 folders, one folder for application A, one folder for application B. The application A only needs permissions to folder A, while application B only needs permission to application B. And you want to make sure that they do not have cross access. So you can use access point to limit or to control access to a specific folder. And not only applications, you can also use this for roles or for groups or for users. So if you want to limit a particular user's access to a single folder, then you can use access points. Other alternatives to access point, you can control access to a bucket or to any resources using the identity-based policy. And you can also use a resource-based policy. For the buckets, we talk about S3 bucket policy. But the shortcomings or the most difficult things about this, about managing access using identity-based policy or the resource-based policy, is that it can easily becomes complex to scale. Imagine if you have multiple, like 4 different groups that need access to the same bucket, and you have to use bucket policies to manage that access. It can become terrible. So it's very difficult to scale. That is why AWS S3 access point is always a better option when you have multiple people accessing the same bucket, but they need granular permissions to a specific folder. Look at this diagram, this illustration. You see, we have 2 applications, application A and application B. Application A and B, both of them can access this bucket, but inside the bucket, there are 2 folders. So application A only needs permissions to folder A, while application B only needs permissions to folder B. So we can use access points to limit the application A to only the folder A. And we can also use access point to limit application B to folder B alone. And guess also what we can use access points for? We can use access point to limit or to restrict access to this bucket. So if you don't want any user or any other application to be able to access this bucket, then you can use access points together with bucket policy. You can use a bucket policy to enforce access to this bucket via the access point. You can configure a bucket policy that says that every access to this bucket should come in through the access point. So anybody that wants to access the bucket directly, they will not have access to it except if they have access points. So today, in today's agenda, we are going to, for this demo, we are going to create 2 rows with no permission, one for each application. Then we create 1 bucket. Inside the bucket, we would create 2 folders. Then after that, we're going to create access points for each of these folders. so that anybody that wants to access the folder, we go through the access points. Then we create policies to the bucket to delegate access control to the access points, which simply means that anybody that needs access to the bucket, they have to go through access point. So to test, then we are going to grant access. We're going to grant access to each of the folder through the S3 access points. Then finally, to test the access control, we're going to create two EC2 instances, or we might use one, just modify or change the roles. After we test one, we change the roles, then we use that same instance to test the second one. So that is the project that we are going to, or the task that we are going to work tonight. Now, let me go to the console. The first thing is to create roles. So I'm going to create two rows. The first row, let me see the name of our row. Okay, I have the row. The first row is going to be application A row. And remember, we're going to attach this row to the EC2. So if you are creating a row that you're going to attach to an EC2, always select the AWS services for the trusted entity type. And then for the use case, select EC2, because we want to attach the row to the EC2. I will not, we are not going to give the row any permission through identity-based policy. So for this, we are not going to select anything here. Go to next, just give the row a name and save it. So with this row, anybody or any instance that has zoomed this row will not be able to do anything based on this policy, because it has no permission. The policy is no permission, so it won't be able to do anything. Then let's create the second one. So we have the two rows. If you want to check, you can just type application. You see application A and application B. If you open any one of them, you will see under permission, there is nothing. If you open the second one, under permission, there is nothing there. So now let's go and create our bucket. So create buckets. So the name of the bucket is going to be general. And then do not check, or just leave the default configuration. Don't change anything. Then go to next. We can have an uppercase as the bucket's name. So I change the uppercase to lowercase, then we save. So we have a bucket called general team buckets. So inside this bucket, we need two folders. Application A folder, save. Then application B folder. So we have our bucket. The next thing is to go and create the access points. So we're going to have two access points. The first one is going to be application A access point and application B access point. So to create the access point, go to access point on the tab, click access point, create access point. Then the access point, to access your access point, you have two network origin. If you select VPC, Virtual Private Cloud, which is VPC, that means you only want to be able to access the access point via endpoints, VPC endpoints. But if you select internet, that means we will be able to access the access point over the general internet, including internet gateway. But if you pick access through the VPC and you are trying to connect to it via the internet gateway, you will not be able to have access to it. So I'm going to connect to this using VPC. So I'm selecting the VPC. Then the next thing is to provide the VPC ID. So I'm going to duplicate this tab and go to my VPC to get my VPC ID. So go to the VPC. I'm using this shared VPC. Get the VPC ID. Go back to my access point. Paste the VPC ID there. Then leave every other settings the way it is. So we have access point for application A. Then we need to create access point for application B. So now that we created our access points, the next thing is to grant permissions to both the bucket and the access points. So the first permission that we want to grant to the bucket is to delegate access to the bucket through the access point. So this means that anybody that wants to access the bucket, they have to go through the access point. So I'm going to put that in the bucket policy. So go to the bucket policy. I already opened the AWS on configuring IAM policies for using access points. If you go to the Amazon Simple Storage Service, the documentation, if you scroll down to the working with access points, the first one there is configure IAM policy for access points. So if you scroll down, you're going to see delegating access points, delegating access control to access points. So just copy this policy, go to your bucket, paste the policy there, then do the modification. The first modification is to ensure that you change the bucket ARN. If you scroll up, you'll see the bucket ARN here. Click on it, modify the bucket ARN, and modify this bucket ARN too. And after that, we need the account number. That is the bucket owner's account ID, which is the same thing as your AWS account number. So go to the AWS account number, copy the account number, and change the bucket owner account number. So with this, we have our delegated policy, which means that every identity that wants to access this account, we go through the access points. And you can see here, this specifies that every identity in the AWS account. That means every identity in the AWS account, and this policy here is a conditional policy that says as long as the string is equal to data access point account. That means this access point, this account, if it is the access point of this account, then they can do anything. That is this policy here. On the bucket and the bucket object. So I'm going to save this. That is everything you need to do on the bucket. Then the next policy is on the access point. So the first policy that we created is to divert or to direct all access to the access point through, all access to the bucket, we direct it through the access point or to the access point. So the next one is the access point itself. So this is where we now start giving people access to the buckets. So let's first start with the application A access. So here we need to go to permission. And when you get to permission, scroll down under access point policy, edit that, go back to the policy documentation. If this time scroll up, copy the first access point policy grant. Copy that. We are going to modify it. Paste it here. So here, what we want to modify here is that this policy is directed to a particular user, but we don't want to direct it to a particular user. We want to direct it to a particular role. So the first thing is to change the account number. So here we have an account number here, change that. Then we have another account number here, we change it. The second thing is to change the region. This is using US West 2, but our own is US East 1. Then if you look further under the resources, we need the ARN, the access point ARN. So if you scroll up, you see the access point ARN, copy it. You can just change it from here, but you are not changing everything. You stop it where you stop it at the object side. So I'm going to paste the access point there. You can see that I remove the resources to the object, then I put the access point ARN there. So after this access point ARN, I'm going to remove Jane because we don't have Jane in our bucket. So here, this is where the bucket stops. This policy is saying we are giving access to this is the access point ARN, which give you access to the bucket. That is to the bucket now. And now to be specific about an object that is in the bucket, don't forget that folder is also an object in the bucket. Folder is a prefix, and inside that there are objects. So to give an object, to give access to an object, we specify the folder that we want to give access to. So the folder for this access is the application A folder, then slash everything inside the application folder. To be sure, I will go back to the S3 and make sure that we get the right name for the folder, because if you don't get the right name for the folder, then the access might be denied. So we have, okay, it's even wrong. We have application A folder. So I'm going to go back to the policy and change the policy. So the access point is giving specific access, is giving access specifically to this folder and everything inside that folder. So this person now, we're still changing this because we are using row, and here I need the row ARN. So I need to go to I also need to go to row. I'm going to open another tab and use this one for row. So I need to go and get the row ARN. So go to row. The two rows that we created, this is first one. I need the ARN, copy it, go back to our application, change this one to the row ARN. So now we have our policy complete. This policy only gives get object and put object action. So meaning that anybody that assume this row, remember it's going to be an EC2, but we can modify that row for other users to assume it. But currently it is meant for EC2. So any EC2 that assume this row will be able to put an object and get an object via the access point inside this folder. It will be able to put and get object inside this folder via the access point. So that is all. I'm going to save this. Then we need to do the same thing for the second access point, which is application B access point. Go to the permission, edit the policy, then now go back, and to save our time, we should have even copied the policy for application A. I mean, for access point A. Let's copy the policy for access point A. We just modify it for B. So go back to the access point for B, edit the policy, and paste. So here, this is for B, so we need to modify it. So the row is going to be application B row, and the folder will be application B folder. Let's make sure that the folder is spelled correctly, because that's, if it is spelled wrong, that will deny us access. So if you go to the bucket, just confirm the folder, application B folder, and that is spelled correctly. So now, if you look at the policy, this policy also granting whoever that assume this row, which is going to be an EC2, whoever that assume it will be able to get an object and put an object inside the bucket via the access point into this folder. So this folder now, the EC2 that assume this row will be able to put an object or get an object from this folder. So that is everything we need to do there. Let's see, there is an error in the policy. It's a policy has invalid resources. Okay, let's look at the resources.
Is it because it still says East?
No.
Oh, no. Okay.
US is 1, AWS ARN, the account number is correct. The access point application, oh, it's supposed to be application B, not A. Okay, so this is also finished. So the next thing that we need to do now is, before we test this, we need to make sure that we have a VPC gateway endpoint enabled, because we said we only want access via the VPC into the bucket. So we need to go to our VPC, go to endpoint, create an endpoint. You can name it access point endpoint. So the access point endpoint is going to be for AWS service and S3 bucket. So the S3 bucket is going to be, the service name is going to be this one, com.amazonaws.us, us1.s3, and then select the gateway endpoint. type is gateway. So saved. Specify the VPC. The VPC is going to be shared VPC and the subnet. So the subnet that we are using, we can attach the endpoints to both of the subnet. So I'm going to attach it. You can attach it to a specific one. You can attach it to both of them. So I'm going to attach it to both of them so that, because we have private subnet and we have public subnet. So in a real life scenario, you're going to attach it. You can attach it to the private one. You can attach it to the private one. Maybe, okay, let's just attach it to the private one because that is exactly what we need. So I'm going to go to create endpoint. So now this is everything we need to do on the VPC. Now to test this access endpoint, we need to go to our EC2. So I'm going to use one of the tabs to open EC2. So now I have already spin up 3 servers so that does not delay us. The first server is called Bastion Host, and the 2 other server is called Application A and Application B. The first thing I want to do is to attach the policy to each of these application server. So for application A, I'm going to go to Action, Security, modify IAM roles, then change the role to application A role, save that, then do the same thing for the application B server, Action, Security, modify role, then application B, save it. So now the EC2 has assumed the roles. So the next thing for us to do is to log into this access point, is to SSH into each of these server. But before we can SSH into this server, we need to do that via the Bastion host, because these 2 servers, they are private. We cannot SSH into them directly. So we first need to get inside this Bastion host. And from the Bastion host, we will jump into the private servers. So let's connect to the Bastion host. Now we are in the Bastion host. So the key for the private server, this is the key. I already pushed the key inside this Bastion host so that I can, from the Bastion host, do SSH-I, then the name of the key, then EC2 user adds the IP address, the private IP address of the private servers. So I'm going to go to the private server A first. It has public IP, but it's actually private server. You can see it's inside the private subnet. So here I'm going to sign in. I'm signing in using the private IP address. You can say yes. Okay, the first thing I'm supposed to do is to do shemon 400, then the the key name, then run the SSH again, and now we are in. You can see the name is different. The private IP is different from this private IP. So we are in the private IP of application A. So I can change the name. I can quickly change the name to using sudo system host name CTL set host name. Then I want to set this host name to application A server. Then just run bash to append. So you can see now the name has changed. So the first thing we need to do after that is to make sure that we have CLI, AWS CLI version 2. So to check that, I will do sudo, AWS version. You can see the CLI that I have is version 1. I will quickly download version 2. So I'm going to open another tab and do AWS CLI version 2, then click on the first one here and just download the one for your instance. I'm using Linux server, so I'm going to download for Linux server. So the only thing I need to do is just to follow the download information. So you want me to remove the first one here for updates, so I'm going to run that code first. Yes, that is done. Then go to the next one. I'm going to run all of this code together at once. So while this one is running, I will go back to the notes and see the one I'm going to run next. So this is the last one. So I'm going to go back there, still downloading. It might take some minutes, but it shouldn't take more than 3 minutes. And once it's finished downloading and we run the last code, before you can actually have access to it, you need to restart the server. Press enter. Then paste this last one. So now, all we just need to do is to restart it, just refresh this. Once you refresh, it's going to log you out from the private server. So you need to SSH back inside it. Then we do AWS version. Now you can see that we have version 2. So now we can test our access points. So to test the access point, what I actually just want to do is to copy a folder from this server and save it inside the, is to copy a file from this server and save it inside the folder that is specifically meant for this server. So I'm going to use Touch to create that folder. Touch, let's just call it this demo application A folder. So if I do ls, you can see the folder is here. So we need to move this folder, copy it, and send, this file, copy it and send it into and save it inside the bucket. You can see currently there is nothing inside this bucket. So this is where we want the file to come. So I'm going to go back here and do AWS copy AWS S3, copy, then you specify the file that you want to copy and the next thing is the access point. The next thing is the access point. So if I do access point, I need to go and get the access point. Go to access point here, then get the access point for access A. Go to property and copy the URL. So I'm going to paste the access point here. Now, this is the access point. So you need to put a slash. This access point is just like you specifying the buckets. And inside the bucket, where precisely are you going? We are going inside this folder. So this folder is just what you need to append to the access point. And once you append it to the access point, then the name of this file that you want to send inside the bucket is what you need to append next. So with that, just press enter. And look, we don't have any error. So that means the file has been sent. So let's go to the access, let's go to the folder and check. So this is the folder here. I'm going to open it, refresh, look at our file. And the same thing, you can copy. So I can save a folder here. Let me upload a folder here. A file. No, close, go back. Upload. I want to upload a file. Let me just upload this file. So where is the file? The file has two long names. So I'm going to go to the bucket folder. You can see this file that I just upload now. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to copy the file, just copy the file name. Then go to our bucket, our EC2 instance. If I do ls, you can see the file is not here. So I can do the same process to copy. But now, for me to copy from the S3 bucket, I'm going to remove this file, because this file is what that is when you are sending a file, that is when you do this. So you just say AWS S3 copy, then you specify where you want to copy from. You specify where you want to copy from and what you want to copy from there. So what I want to copy from there is this name, is this file. And I'm copying it from the folder. So this is like you are specifying a bucket that you want to copy from using the access point, and you are specifying the folder from which you want to copy, and you are specifying the file that you are copying. So the next thing is that you give it a space, then you specify the name that you want to name it if it comes to your system here. If you like, you can change this name to something else, meaning that once you copy it, it should save it here using a different name. But I'm just going to use the same name. And when I do ls, look at it, we have our file. So let's test something. Let's try to post inside folder B. So I'm just going to go up twice. So you can see this is copy. I'm copying this file because we still have it. I want to save it now using access point A, but where I want to save it to now is folder B. I'm saving it inside folder B, and I'm naming it this because this is the name of the file. But the only thing that changed is that I'm saving it now inside the folder B. So let's see what's going to happen here. Did you see? Access denied. I can't save there because it's not for this folder. The access point is only for this application A server. So if you want to save file inside the B, then you have to go to the second server. So let's go to the second server and quickly do the same thing. So I'm going to exit from this server. So I'm back to my basting host. So the same thing, I just need to SSH into the second server, then change this IP address to the second server IP address. So go to my EC2 instance and get the second server. This is the application B server. Copy the private IP, then go inside the instance and paste inside the basting host and paste it there. So I'm just going to do yes. Now I'm inside the server B. If I do AWS, that version, you see this one also is going to run AWS CLI version 1. We need to do the same thing and change the version to version B. So just copy this, paste, run it. Yes. While that one is loading, let's go to the next one, copy the whole thing, paste, enter. It takes some minutes. So while we are waiting for this, let's go to the documentation again and copy the next one, which is going to be the last one. Anything here, the one we use is to update. But if you want to download fresh, then you have to start from downloading the installer here. So what we just update it, so that is fine. So go to the instance, it's still running, give it some time. Once this finish running, just refresh the server by refreshing the tab, and it will automatically be in a ready state to start using. If you look at our EC2 instance, it's showing a public IP address. Is because when I create this subnet, I tell it to assign public IP. So that's just for purpose sake, but it doesn't have access to the internet. That's why it has a public IP address, because it's inside a private subnet. So the next thing is to paste the last one and clear, just restart, and we're good. We did not SSH back into the. So after we download the CLI and we restart the server, we refresh, it logs out from the private server. So we need to SSH back into the private server. So I'm going to copy the B server, put it here, then SSH. So we're going to do the same thing here. If I do ls, you see there is no file created. So let's first create our file, call it application demo application b5.test. Then let me go and create this. Then let me go and copy the S3 access point for the B. S3 access point, you copy the S3 URI. Then go back to the instance, do AWS S3 copy the file that I want to copy and the access point, which is like equivalent to the bucket. Then specify the folder where you want to copy it inside. So go back to my S3 bucket. I just want to make sure that I'm using the file name correctly. That's why I come back here to copy it, so that if you type it wrong, it will not allow you to post. So now I need to append the file name that I want to copy, which is called application b5.test. So here now, you can see we don't have the issue here. So this one goes successfully. So if you go now inside the bucket and open the bucket, you can see we have our application B5. And if you go back to the EC2, we can also do the same thing by, let's say we download a file directly from the bucket. The reason why we are able to download file directly like this is because, one, AWS console do not support access points. And secondly, we are using the root user, and the root user is the owner of the bucket. So that's why we can copy, we can paste things directly inside the bucket, but every other person will not be able to do anything directly on the bucket. So now I'm just going to copy the name of the file, then go to the EC2 instance. So what I want to do now is I want to download the file that we saved directly, that is inside the bucket, inside the folder. I want to download it on this server. So if I do ls, you see the file is not here. So for me to have the file here, I just need to do AWS S3 copy. Where do I want to copy from? I want to copy from this bucket using the access point, and inside from this folder, which is folder B, and the file I want to copy, this is the name. So when it comes to my server, this server, I also want to name it the same name. This is the name I want to give to it on this server. Or let's try something different. Let's try to change this name. That, hey, once you copy it, before you paste it here, change it to allen.png. So here, say forbidden. Okay, you can't change that. So let me just go back. Because the permission that we did was only put and get. So that makes sense. So here, forbidden, let me see, AWS S3, we have the access points, we have the bucket. AWS S3 copy from this access point, copy from this bucket, and this is the name I want to copy from, and this is the bucket's name. An error occur 403 when calling the head object forbidden. Something is wrong here. Let me see ls. Let me check the buckets. I'm going to round up this now so that I can go to other thing. S3. Let me save another thing. Let's see. Okay, you can see what happened. I actually save it outside of the bucket. So when he wants to copy, he can't copy because the only access that the server has is directly inside this bucket. So that is why we are having that issue. But if I actually save it inside the folder, we are copying, because we are not copying inside the folder, we are copying from outside. So now let me save directly inside the folder. So that is understandable. I'm saving this now inside the folder. The initial one we saved earlier was saved inside the bucket and not the folder. So I'm going to go back, remove this one because it's directly inside the folder. The access point does not grant permission directly to the folder, I mean to the bucket. You only grant access to a specific folder. So now I'm going to, we have it inside the bucket now. So let me just copy in case if it is a wrong one. So I'm just going to go back, do the same thing. Then paste this one here. I think they are the same. So just to be sure. So if you read this, AWS S3 copy, meaning that we want to use AWS CLI to copy. And where are we copying from? We are copying from a bucket that uses these access points. And inside the bucket, there is a folder called application B folder. And there is a file inside that folder called this long name. And once we copy it, we want to save it on this server using this name.
Yeah,
So
can you try to change the name?
Huh?
Can you try to change the name and see if it works this time?
We try both. So you can see now it's saved. So let's try to change the name. But if you are changing the name, you are only changing the name that you want to save it as. So let's use allen.png. And we have it saved, let's change it. So you can see allen.png. So this is the end of this video. It's supposed to be a very short one, except we have some glitch which we were able to troubleshoot. Any question? It's a very fast one, but we already covered this topic before, so we have some issue the day we are covering it because we didn't use VPN gateway, VPN endpoint gateway. That is why. If not, we shouldn't have covered it today. But I'm so happy that I was able to cover multiple use cases today.
I think I have one question. Since it's a role, I mean, aren't roles like temporary and they don't like last forever or something? Just from my memory, I thought I remember hearing that.
I didn't get that question. You're asking about a role?
Yeah, like when we first went over IAMs and we said like roles don't like last forever, and it's like they expire after a certain time or something like that.
So the role that we, for those, let me even quickly say this, for those people that were not here, this is the architecture. This is exactly what we work on today. So if you look at this architecture, we have two servers, A and B, and both of them share the same buckets. And both of them are inside a private subnet. But despite they share the same bucket, they only need specific access, a restricted access to the folder for that applications. And that is why we use AWS S3 access points to limit the access of each of the applications to this folder. And even anybody from outside will not be able to use the folder if they don't go through access points. And the access point must be, for instance, if this person also needs access to this folder, then you have to create access points for the person. Otherwise, the person will not be able to access any folder. But the use case here is purposely, you can use this kind of thing or this kind of architecture if you are trying to prevent virus from propagating over to other servers. So if, for instance, let's say this application, this server has a malware, the way malware operates, it propagates and spread itself. So if it's trying to spread itself, it cannot spread itself above outside subnet, outside to other server, because it only have access directly to a specific bucket, to a specific folder, and it's not sharing that file with other people. Just imagine if this server is compromised and you have access to application B folder, then it can compromise the folder in application B folder, the files in application B folder, and that can be used by application B. So this is this is a normal use case. We use this kind of architectural work, and this is why I say, okay, let me take today to cover this. I don't know if that answered your question, Omari.
Yeah, I just quickly like looked it up real quick. So I was just getting it confused with the IAM user expirations. You know how they have like temporary credentials. I was getting
No, they are not the same.
Yeah,
they are not the same.
Okay.
So you can grant access to this access that we create by limiting, passing through access points. You can grant the same access using bucket policy or IAM user. But it's if you have multiple, let's say you have like 50 users, and you want to create IAM policy for them or bucket policy for the 50 users to limit their access to a specific bucket, a specific folder, it's going to be extremely complex and it's going to be very difficult to scale. So the best option is just to create an access point. Uche, your question. Are you just trying to greet us or do you have a question? Okay, I think she's just trying to greet us. All right, let's go to today's topic. SNS. So when we talk about SNS, SNS is a simple, okay, 1 second. You guys can hear me?
I can hear you. Can you
Yeah,
hear
I
me?
can hear you. I couldn't hear
We
the
can hear you.
person that was trying to ask the
Thanks.
question earlier.
Sorry, Uche, everybody can hear me. You are the only one that can hear me.